Alrighty, so let me know how old your little ones are, and then we can go from there. Okay, so Zach's the only one who's popped in. Ezra, 3.5 years. Beautiful. And can you guys tell me just your main sort of issues that you're seeing at the moment with your little one's sleep? Because I we're only going to have a sort of small group tonight, so I'd rather actually take this time almost like a Q&A style, because you'll all be able to take so much out of what talk about anyway, to do it that way rather than like me just talking about nap transitions or 4-month-old regression and you're like, that's not really relevant. Like, I don't want to spend the whole first hour until we finally get to toddlers and then you're like, oh, now we're here. So if you're happy, it's good that it's in that respect, it's good that it's smaller, because then we can really get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on for you guys individually, which is amazing. I'm just gonna wait because I haven't got a lot of answers, so I'm just gonna wait a minute. Oh, okay. Oh, no worries, Amanda. 15-month-old. Okay, beautiful. Alrighty. Okay, so we've got toddlers essentially at the moment. Oop. Okay. So I'm actually going to start around toddlerhood. So I'm going to start talking pretty much coming from about how old is your, oh, yeah, 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 perfect, Zach, got you. Okay. So I want to start talking about independent sleep and why we see sleep issues, particularly in toddlers 12 months and above. So that seems to be where we're all sort of sitting at the moment. So most of the time, for a lot of little ones, and even if you've got a babe who's under 12 months, this is so transferable to you guys, and relevant is the word I'm looking for. It's so relevant to you guys. So basically what happens with sleep, and the whole reason why sleep can sort of go derailed at points, is often typically looking at what they're associating with falling asleep and what they associate with getting back to sleep. So for a lot of little ones, they're actually really prone to relying on external measures to get to sleep and to get back to sleep. So when they're babies, it might be rocking, dummy, constant breastfeeding, that sort of thing. As they start to get older, it can still absolutely be those things, or it might become things like we have to sit on the bed, we have to sit next to the bed, we have to, yeah, those sorts of things. So no matter what, whenever we're looking at sleep issues, so be that they're not falling asleep independently, they're waking frequently, they're catnapping if you've got a baby, this honestly is going to be really important for you. It doesn't matter what your prop is. So when I say prop, it's something external that comes into play to get your baby to sleep. So again, that could be dummy, could be feeding, it could be rocking, it could be co-sleeping, sitting on the bed, that sort of thing. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a 4-month-old or if we're talking about a toddler. Typically, toddler, if they're waking at nighttime, it's often that something has changed, not always, but something has changed and is different from when they fell asleep to when they're awoken. Same with babies. Now, if your little one starts to associate external measures to get to sleep, not only do they then associate that with and need that to get to sleep, but they often need that to get back to sleep through sleep cycles. And for many families, it's particularly problematic in the second half of the night, early hours, and catnapping. But it's also essentially looking at, okay, well, is it, because a lot of people say, and perfect, Tanvi. So a lot of people say our bedtimes are easy, though it's not them, but often they're easier because many people are still playing particular roles in getting them to sleep. So in order to make change during the night, we must look at what our little ones are associating with sleep. And if that's something you're doing now, even if Tabby, you're, thinking, no, like they go to sleep independently, but same with toddlers, you're having to sit there a little bit, you're getting them really drowsy first. They're getting like kind of 80% there, and then they'll do the last little 20% by themselves. If that is the case, then that is still essentially going to become problematic throughout the night. So, what we want to look at is what is it that they're relying on to get to sleep? What is that prop? Or what is different when they awaken? What are they missing? What is cueing them to wake, right? There's a few other things that can cause it, and I'm going to definitely get into that. Now, not only again do they rely on it, but what happens is little ones who rely on those external measures, it's almost like parents will say they almost like sleep with one eye open, right? So basically, what will happen, Rob, this is going to be great. So basically, what'll happen is they'll be like, for example, the rocking stopped, you've moved, that sort of thing. Now, for the first few hours, they might do okay because they're in a naturally deeper sleep, right? But come the second half of the night, so let's just say from midnight onwards, they get into a lighter surface of sleep. Guys, I'm going to grace you with my beautiful drawing. I usually have this prep. It's not my drawing, but my pen. So but let's hope the kids, I shouldn't even blame the kids. Let's hope we haven't got one too far away. There we go. So the way that I look at this is, let's just say our little ones are in sleep. Now I'm going to bring this closer in a second, right? Okay. So we've seen that they've got this sleep. What happens for the first part of the night, they're in the deeper sleep. Right, so they're drifting in between this deeper sleep. Now, for some little ones, they're still awake at that point, but they might wake at 9 or 10, for example, or they might wake after one sleep cycle, but they're drifting in this deeper sleep, right? Come the second half of the night, we all sleep in a lighter surface sleep, right? So we all just tend to be in a lighter surface sleep. We have more of that active light phase sleep. And so that's what will happen. I'm just going to make this a bit bolder at that point. Now, your little ones should essentially just be cycling between some sort of alertness and back off, a little bit of alertness and back off, right? This part gets risky in that second half because they're now just in that lighter surface, right? So I hope that that makes some sense. Now, if something is missing, it's gone, you've moved, that sort of thing, and they waken, then bang. Now, the only reason that little one's awaken and everyone goes, but you're meant to wake during the night. Absolutely. We all do. It's a safety mechanism. We've got to kind of think of it like primal day. We're in caves, there's lions around, like all the things to check that everything is as it was when it fell asleep, when they fell asleep. When it's not, that's when you're going to get that call out. And it's really, proven, especially babes who have dummies, that if they rely on that external measure to get off to sleep, they're more likely to stay on lighter surface sleep, right? Which makes it harder then come these times. Now, if your little one, I'm just going to, sorry, this isn't the best way of doing this. I am going to show you guys as I do it. If your little one has to waken to find a dummy or something's gone or they need to be rocked or whatever it is, something's missing, that's when they're going to wake up more. And that's when you're more likely to get those different sleep cycles, right? Same with you. So if they come into this part, then it's missing, and that's when you keep getting those call outs. So if you're getting frequent night waking or catnapping, that is why. It is typically because they are relying on something external to get to sleep and get back to sleep. Now, second to that, the other thing is whenever you think of your toddlers or little ones' bedtimes, really important, doesn't matter if they're 4 months, 6 months, 10 months toddlers. The next thing I really want to touch on, so guys, if you're going to make any changes, like all of this matters. Please don't think like, oh, I have to hear her say it's about sitting by the bed. Like, if I work with a client, I'm literally looking at the whole lead up to bedtime, that where the milk's happening, what's happening on the milk, what's the sleep pressure like, what's the awake times like, what's the energy expenditure like, where are screens at, like all of that in that lead up to bedtime. Okay. I can't stress that enough. So it's really, really important that then we look at, okay, well, they've got their awake time. So, and I'm going to teach you guys, I'm going to talk you through a bit more of that independent sleep side of things, because that's what we're trying to move towards. Because when little ones are able to fall asleep independently and get into a deeper sleep, they're more likely just going to have these like waves of alertness to check everything is. And when nothing's changed, that's when they're likely to let go, when they're not like relying on the dummy and half sucking it, being rocked, that sort of thing. That's when they're likely to let go and get into that deeper sleep. Toddlers are so aware that you've been there at the beginning of the night and now you've moved. They know that the next time that you wake, it's going to be moved. But what's really important as well, on top of that, is really looking at our little ones' sleep pressure. So, a lot of people ask me, when should I drop naps? Like, how do I know when to transition naps, and the awake times and that sort of thing? And I love the idea with awake times of having a general awake time. So, you might sort of say, okay, my 10-month-old has 3 hours, for example, or three and a bit hours. Alternatively, you might be like, my toddler has no nap now, they go down at about 6:30. But for a lot of people who are saying my little one's just refusing their later naps or they just won't go down at bedtime, they just fight it, our bedtime's 10 p.m. or whatever it is. I always say have an approximate age awareness, like what their age approximate awake time would be. Pair that with observation. However, if you're getting sleep refusal, really lengthy toddler bedtimes, drawn out settling processes, that sort of thing, the next really important thing to look at is to make sure you check your little one's sleep pressure. I can't stress this enough. I'm really big on this because it's so profound in terms of the difference that it makes. Give me one sec, guys. I've got to see if I've got a better option for this pen situation. Got a whole office desk and not a pen, of course. Not a better pen anyway. Okay, what we're going to pretend is that this is your toddler or your baby's day. It's their whole awake time. Right. So let's just say you've got a little one who's 15 months old, for example, and we know that they might now be on, for example, 1 or 2 naps in that daytime, right? Let's just say this is their last awake time before bed, and it's around probably 4 hours if they're on 2 naps, but maybe up to 5 or so if they're on 1 nap. So this is their last awake time. Now, guys, this is transfer, doesn't matter, like, oh my God, why do I keep forgetting that word? Relevant. If your little ones are on 2 or 1 nap or no naps, right? Let's just say your little one's got no naps. This is their whole day awake period. So from start, and they're going to be awake all the way around. What we have to look at in this period before bedtimes or before naps, for example, is their sleep pressure. Now, as you can see here, if our right before they're due to go to bed, so let's just say it's the opposite on this, but they've had their wake time. Right before they're due to go to bed, they've built up that sleep pressure. What we want to do is look at that energy expenditure. The more outdoor time your little ones can get, the better, right? Because not only is it then exposure to that circadian rhythm, to the sun going down, like all of that. That's why when you're camping, if you haven't noticed, you're really tired early. So important. More outdoor time, the better, right? So what happens is that typically we want them to be expending that energy. But then sometimes come bedtime, suddenly we're like, okay, now you have your little sippy cup of milk and sit back in your little chair, or they're walking around just sipping on the bottle, or they're sitting back in their chair having, 7 books, because we're now having to do 7 books, plus wind down, plus all the things. Now we're having some screen time because we're like, cool, they're above 2, we'll chuck them in front of a TV when we get home from daycare. And then bedtime becomes an absolute shit show. And what we have to look at there is where is their sleep pressure going and what's dwindling? Because a lot of people then jump to, it must be the nap, it must be they need later bedtime, or it's this or that, when often it's because not even just right before, but in their awake period, they've really lost that sleep pressure. And that makes settles really tricky, especially if you're going to teach your little one something new. So, if anyone's going to apply anything that I'm talking about tonight, it is really important first, and I can't stress this enough, that you see this as an overall whole program, right? So, it's not just like, I'm just going to change this part because that part wasn't relevant. Like, it is literally, let's look at that sleep pressure, the awake times, what they're associating with sleep, and find those things first. Work on those things first, moving the milk away from bed, bed, keeping them more engaged, like half an hour, keeping them more engaged on that milk, making sure it's not dragging on for long periods of time. This does not matter if you've got a 6 month old or a 4 year old if they're having milk, right? They're building up that sleep pressure, building up that expenditure. And then in the lead up to bedtime is connection time. Now, I get it. I honestly get it. I've been a single mom, I've been a FIFO mom. 100% get the idea that in that lead up to bedtime, and you might have your little one home from daycare now, and you're straight into the unpacking bags, you know, getting dinner on, that sort of thing. But the next part is really important if you're going to make changes. And it doesn't matter if you've got a baby or a big kid, but is that connection time in the lead up to bedtime. So when we think about it, you know, back in time, children were spent majority, if not their whole day and night with their primary caregivers, they're big people, right? And now sometimes they're lucky to get 2 or 3 hours in a day, right? Now, for a lot of us, we kind of use that time when they get home. We are like, oh, they've been at school all day, they can have some screen time, which I totally get. I get it. But let's make it maybe half an hour max. And the other thing is that then we've got to be like, right, now let's get that sleep pressure back. Screens absolutely affect sleep. They affect their ability to stay in good sleep, especially or even so in that second half of the night. They make it really hard for little ones to produce their own that melatonin, and in fact cause hormones that keep them more awake, more alert. So if you're having trouble with nightmares, night terrors, broken sleep, difficult bedtimes, behavior, all of that side of things, we need to look at the screens. I know this hurts, but it's really important. And then what we want to do is be like, do you know what? Our babes, which I get it, it's life. Everyone's, you know, most people are in the same position. They haven't had that connection time, and they will pull that connection time from any other point, and it won't present like that. You might not recognize that my little one's actually just trying to be with me, like they're actually just trying to, even if it's in really poor ways, or this is now a consequence of like overtiredness, we haven't got their sleep sorted, or you know, the fact that we've had screens on and now we turn it off and then we know. So the way that I want you to think about this too is, imagine, for example, there's all this energy inside of children, right? They are just like robust with energy, all this energy inside. And when we do lengthy milk, when we do the screen time, think of it as putting a lid on a genie. And that genie is the energy, right? And then suddenly we're like, right, turn the TV off, it's time for bed. It's like you then unleash that lid, the milk's finished, and it's just like all of this stuff is built up, and that's what comes up. When you think about big emotions, that's energy in motion, emotion, energy in motion, right? So I want you guys to think about those things. And this is so important for your 4 month olds, 5 month olds, 3 year olds, because the same, if 4 month olds are having lots of little feeds in their awake time, they're on and off the breast, or they're on the breast for 30 minutes of their hour and a bit awake time, we can see then why they have a really hard time settling. And it's really hard to make any changes when it's not holistically looked at. So that's really important. So I really love the idea of, if you want them to have a little bit of screens, do it for 30 minutes when they get home, right? Then it's off, it's done. They know that that's it. It's not up for debate at other points. With our toddlers, it's really important. And guys, toddlers, we're talking 12 months and up. This is not just like thinking 3 year olds. It's really important to note that boundaries are exactly what they need in that lead up to bedtime. And most of the work that I do with older kids, so when we're talking 9 or 10 year olds, it becomes more of an anxiety around bedtime because it's always been such a content, like a hard, angsty situation when it hasn't been sorted earlier. But when we're talking about 3 year olds, that sort of age and stage, often what it is that the toddlers are leading the show. So, what I want you guys to do is take this as permission to be like, we are absolutely able to hold really good boundaries with our little one, and know that that is not only important, but it's safety for our toddlers' brains. It leads to less chaos in their brains. It's a form of love in boundaries. So when that TV goes off, or when you say, no, 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 we've had our 2 books, or whatever it might be, your next role, and I know this can be tiring, especially at the beginning, it will get so much easier when your word carries weight. So if your little one is used to the big feelings knocking you to the side and then getting what they want, mark my words, you're in for a harder and harder battle. If you're sort of using things like screens to get through activities of daily living, so you have to screen your toddler to brush their teeth, screen to have dinner, screen to, you know, get their pajamas on, this is worth doing more than I can say. And That is because in the lead up to your bedtimes, when you can hold a boundary, the biggest thing that I would say around boundaries is letting them get, and this is really important for sleep. So when you're like, why is this lady talking about screens in bedtime? Boundaries, it's really important because often toddlers' bedtimes are impacted way, I mean, all babes, but way before they actually hit the sack. So when you're going to make that change, what we have to understand is that if your little one is having a hard time with the new boundary, our role is to be really kind, firm leaders, right? It is, I'm sturdy. I've got this situation. I've said no. I can handle my big feelings that are coming up for me, which might be frustration, like anger, upset, triggered, like this feels really awful. Oh, it just stop that, like crying because I can't handle it. I don't like having them be sad, whatever it might be at that moment. I want you to think of it as if like you're doing it for them. Like I'm giving them this ability to be able to hold space and know that they will get through these big feelings because they will. It'll take longer at the beginning, it'll get easier, especially if they are used to running the show, right? I'm not doing them any favors in knowing that they can just have these big feelings and I lax whatever or lapse whatever it is that I was going to hold in place, because that it will come back. And anytime you think whether or not it's bedtime screens, food, whatever it is, or just like the quick, easy route, I kind of want you to think of that as like you're paying for it long term, like the long way around, right? So, yep, you've taken the shortcut, but then like it's a shitty, path, like by the end of it. In the end, it was like a totally different detour, and then it took you longer to get back. Kind of think of it that way. And so, in that lead up to bedtime, not only have we checked their awake time, we've got that energy expenditure out, that built up that sleep pressure. We're holding kind boundaries. The boundaries are there. We don't keep going back to that thing. So, for example, if they're like, I want another book, or I want more milk, or I want whatever it is, you're not going, oh, the milk, like da da da, the milk and this, and oh, maybe we'll get this tomorrow, and da, da, da. Like, don't negotiate or like enter into too much of the dialogue around the boundary, because that leaves it open. There's a negotiation there, there's a like, it is that's the boundary. Mum said or dad said no more, right? So that boundary is set, it's there. And that will actually, when they know that that boundary is actually there and they can learn to trust your word, they will let go of it quicker. But the more you're delving into the boundary and promising them something tomorrow and this or that, or maybe if they do this, no, the boundary is as the boundary is. Your kindness part is, but your emotions, whatever you need to get out at that point, of course, if they're hitting you, you can stop that. But what I mean is that if they're like, having their big feelings around that, I want you to be like, oh, get it out, babe. Like in your mind, think, yup, get it all out. Get all of that feeling out around that thing, because at the end of it, they'll be like, and be okay. Now, when you have to convince your babes out of those big feelings and stop it and that sort of thing. And again, guys, if you've got little ones like babies, this is so important to know now. When you feel like I have to get them out of that feeling, you're basically saying, I can't handle your big feelings. You can't trust your big feelings, because even your own mum or dad can't like have those, like be present and hold space and take the bus with you through those big feelings. So what we want to do is be like, I'll sit on all the bus stops. One of your bus stops might be anger and frustration and sadness in terms of your child's, right? And one day it's happiness. And one day it's, proud of themselves, whatever it is that your child is experiencing. I want you to think of these bus stops and be like, I'm going to take the bus with you, whichever one it is. I'm going to allow you to be on. I'm going to sit next to you. I'm not going to pull you from that bus and you only have to be in this content bus, this wrapped up bus, basically, because that's not life. And we're teaching our little ones how to regulate, how to understand, like how to have, all the things, tenacity, like all those things, resilience to be able to get through these big feelings and not have to escape them. Because with adults, if you don't know how to process or be with big feelings, we all know that then we find alternative ways to manage them, controlling things, addictions, all the things, right? So it's really important that our little ones to learn to manage their feelings, right? Amazing. Boys deserve to have big feelings. Boys deserve to cry. Boys deserve to be vulnerable. Very important for our dads to learn how important that is to raise healthy young men. Really, really important. It doesn't mean you're going to have a weak boy. It means that but as they get older, they'll be socially appropriate. The world will make sure that they are. Their classrooms will make sure that they're socially appropriate and they won't be, but for them to be able to learn that at home, they can have their big feelings and learn to get through those, process those, feel those, and then be okay with them at the end of that. That is where lives, like, that is amazing. That is where we're setting children up to be really healthy young human beings. So what we want to do is let them get through that. They're allowed to have their big feelings. They're not allowed to have all their behaviors. So, for example, if they're doing certain things that are like, hurting, you, or, whatever else, I will not let you do that. We will not hit mum, whatever it is. But you can, I understand. And the other thing is, you want to really sort of recognize with them, I know that you wanted this. However, that's not happening. And that's the boundary. We're not going to have that, tonight. And when you're ready, we can go and brush our teeth. We can go on to the next thing. So this is really important with toddler bedtimes, because if you just get to bedtime and they've had the whole run of the show, it's been a whole circus for an hour, and then you're like, right, now it's bedtime, get in there and stop whatever it is. They're like, who are you to tell me what to do, kind of thing. So it's really important to look at that. They're allowed to have their big feelings. You're allowed to have your boundary. And that's the middle road. That's the gentle but not passive parenting middle road. Okay. It will take a little bit for them to get through it. It's a bit frustrating at first. You can get a stamp chart, have their activities, has milk, read a book, two books, pajamas on, and they can stamp each one as they go along, for example, right? So that's really exciting. If they stay in their bed all night, they get a sticker at the bottom, something like that, right? Beautiful idea. So I love those sorts of things. It's not a reward chart. It's almost like they hold it in a clipboard and they do it as it goes along, and it gives them a sense of distraction and that sort of thing as they go along. So then what we want to look at is, okay, well, we now know those things are really important in the lead up, but they're still relying on us to get to sleep. So once you put your little one into bed, now for babies, you might then be looking at, okay, they've been really awake on their feed. They haven't gotten sleep on their feed. Then we kind of wake them up. Then we're like, now stay awake, now bedtime, because they're going to get a second wind, and that's a nightmare because babies don't know how long they've slept for. So if you let them get sleepy on their feeds, then you wake them up in order to put them down, it'll be a disaster. But they've had their awake time, they've been wide awake. Then what we want to do is look at methods, like how can we move away? For toddlers, I love the idea of bringing a chair in the room and moving it away over 3 to 4 days, and then moving to more of a step and leave away very quickly. So at the start, you're just coming back. You're just leaving very quickly. I'm just going to flush the toilet. Just going to check on your brother, blah, blah, blah. And you're leaving for 20 seconds and coming straight back to your toddler, right? Once you get to that point, once you move the chair away, right? For babies, it might be that you're staying in the room and you're moving away from the cot. And at the beginning, you're doing a lot more hands-on, verbal, physical, picking them up to do a little calm if you need to, back down, that sort of thing. Or you move to more of your stepping in, stepping out. And you need to work out what feels comfortable for you guys, of course, at this point. But that's sort of, the beginning of like how you can sort of, okay, can I do a check-in? When you're doing any of these things, what I want you to know is that sometimes less is more. So if you're in the room with your toddler and they're having, big feelings over the fact that you're not sitting on the edge of their bed, or you've stopped holding their hand because you're going to start to move away, let them have those big feelings, but don't enter into the dialogue too much. Now, often what I find, even for babies, is less or more is more. So simply being there, putting your hand through the cot and doing a bit of a pat on the mattress, holding a hand, like, for your babies, putting a hand on their like back or bottom for the first night, just doing a little bit of a pat, that sort of thing. Take note of things that make them better or worse. For a lot of little ones, they hate it when you keep laying them back down. Like, don't keep laying them back down. You'll just irritate them even more. They prefer that you're just there doing a bit of shush or a hum. And you need to understand that because it is that change, because they want what they know, they are going to have those big feelings around that change. But our job is to make sure we do it all right in that lead up, and right in terms of still being really supportive, but supporting, not fixing to sleep. And that's the really big difference. And then what you would do after that is then, for example, with your toddlers, really important. With toddlers, it doesn't work just to sit there and let them do what they want for an hour and a half at bedtime, or return them back and not make eye contact 24 times in a night. It doesn't work. The idea is, this is my boundary, and a boundary is something that I'm going to do, not something I'm going to ask you as a 2-year-old or 3-year-old to do. And my boundary is, I'm going to sit by your bed if you lay quietly, right? If you keep kicking your legs around, getting out of bed, mucking around, talking, laughing, playing, anything that's sort of being awake, and we don't want to put any pressure on sleep. So we're really not going to focus on the word sleep. Okay. Now, if you've got a little one who's got night waking, this is really important. Okay. So this is important if you've got, even if I get it, like some people will be like, no, it's only this part or it's only that part. You can't spot fire, like put out spot fires. You really need to look at it as a whole part. So if you've got a little one waking up in the nighttime, this is the most important part to start. So when it comes to then being there, it's I'm happy to stay here as long as you're laying quietly. We don't put any word pressure on that word sleep because we don't want to attach emotion or pressure to sleep. If you keep whatever it might be, like kicking your legs, that sort of thing, I'm going to step out of the room for a moment. And suddenly you've got a little one that goes, oh, I didn't like that. They might come to the door and they're crying, and you've walked out, shut the door for a moment, then you open it back up. Right, I'm happy to stay, sweetie, but you need to lay quietly. Right, that's my boundary. I'm happy to stay. I'm happy to support you completely, but I'm not happy to be an audience to a performance for the next hour and a half come bedtime. However, this is only fair if we've found connection time. They have to feel like they've had our attention. That is undivided attention. That is, if you're cooking at nighttime, like get them on one of those little towers, cook away with them. I honestly, guys, like I get it, but I do it every day. And it becomes easier. And so, and it's so possible. So, and I know we're all really depleted too. So I really get that. So please don't think this is coming from a place of like ignorance to where everyone's at, but it's really important because I can't ask you to hold boundaries and do these things and put this in place if their time of feeling close to you or connecting with you, even through poor behavior, is that only time for them. I don't want to take that away from them. So what we've got to do is be like, you know what, I'm going to ask this of them and I'm going to give this in return. I'm going to not put them in front of TV for ages before bed and then expect them to follow boundaries and behave well, because I know that screens do the opposite. It absolutely affects their attention, their focus, their concentration, their ability to do tasks is greatly impacted, their behavior, aggression, like all the things are so linked, right? So I'm going to ask this of you, but in return, I'm going to give you some connection time. Let's do a toddler-led walk together. Come cut up some veggies with me. Do you know what? When we're doing the bedtime routine stuff, don't do the same thing. Don't ask them to do 4 boring things in the lead up to bedtime in a row. When they're so tired, right? Like they're at the end of it. We're like, now brush your teeth, get your pajamas on. Do it. Like that's so boring. Like, and then at the end of that, all you get is bedtime. Like the boo. I know we think it's amazing. They don't. So it's like, what toys are they playing with? Go and grab the toys. And guys, when you think this sounds like a lot of effort the effort and the emotional draining it takes to get a child to bed for an hour and a half and or have arguments and or go to bed and feel guilty because you've been so frustrated and or take the shortcuts and it ends up biting you in the ass anyway, like grabbing their toys, for example, that they're playing with them and being like, let's go brush the dinosaur's teeth, like let's go brush Barbie's teeth, like whatever it is, right? um and taking those things and being like, do you want to come have a shower with me tonight, and sitting on the shower floor for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of time. It just has to be like, I'm submersing myself in you, like I am looking you in the eyes, I'm communicating with you, I'm talking to you, I'm actually really present with you in this moment. And sometimes when we first go to do this, it feels really hard, like for a lot of us, when you think about like, hold on, when did I sit with them last? Like, and for some, I get it, that's what you do all day, and that's amazing, great, like all the things. But realistically, sometimes I'm like, shit, I got to the end of the day. I didn't even sit down and do one book with them. Like, I didn't even like do a blocks. Like, so whatever you can do, mix up that bedtime routine, get the boring stuff done at certain points, or do something else in between the boring stuff, or meet them in the lounge room while they're playing with their toys and bring a little toothbrush and cup, like whatever you can do to mix it up a little bit so that it keeps it a little bit more, not such that like requests into the lead up to bedtime. It'll make such a big difference. And then that time with them, and then I'm happy happy to stay, but you need to lay quietly, right? Or babies, I'm going to stay with this method, be that, in the room, something like you're stepping in and out, but it's not to settle. You might still feel like they're still upset, but they need to get through that initial process as long as you're, you know, uh, bedtime's been in line, that lead up to bedtime. I'm just having a read of this for a second. Yeah. So here's the next thing. For example, during the nighttime when they wake, so you're still going to get night waking until they learn to be awake at the beginning of the night and put themselves off to sleep without you lingering on the outside of the door, not down the hallway. They need to be good night, sweetie, and out you go, basically, and you walk away. So you get to that point, right? Or if you're doing the leave and check. Once they learn to be awake and asleep at the beginning of the night, completely awake and to sleep, they will get better at transitioning through the nighttime. If they keep waking during the night, or when they do, because they will initially, that's when you can go back to implementing a method. So for an anonymous, perfect, because you don't want to, for example, then at nighttime start being like, well, here's your bottle of milk, here's your rocking, here's all those things, right? So you stay consistent, unless they're young and they need feeds, of course, but you stay absolutely consistent, that's right, with that method at that point. If they're due a feed, because for example, if you've got a 4-month-old, they might be on 1 to 2 feeds a night. If your little one's 5 months and above, typically 1 feed after midnight is no worries. And so you'd go back to the resettles at other points unless it's feed time. And then you'd stay with that. Now, then during the day, I tend to love, especially for babes, so talking about babies at this point, your feed, play, sleep. Then the right awake time, building up that sleep pressure, wide awake on those feeds, and then going back into a method for the daytime nap. So you start always any change at the beginning of the nighttime, then roll it through into the next day, essentially from there. So, and then also looking at that awake time for your 13-month-old, that yeah, I'd probably say 3.5 to 4.5 in terms of wake time, totally okay. Your three is probably a bit too short awake time for that age, hun. So yeah. So having a look at that connection time too, Zach, I think, that lead up is great. And then you can sort of start to move away. And then also just especially if you've got an older toddler, understanding that change feels yucky. I mean, it will for babies too. It does for us. Like our brain doesn't care what's good for us. Our brain cares for what it knows and what was safe and what didn't kill us, basically. So it's like, oh, that's familiar. Didn't kill me. That'll do. That's why we stay in shitty relationships, bad jobs, all the things, stay stuck in things because it's a cycle that's familiar. It brings us a sense of security, a sense of comfort, that sort of thing. It doesn't mean it's good for us, right? In fact, people will lose marriages over sleep deprivation. Their babes will be, chronically sleep deprived, but the change feels really uncomfortable. And if you need more support to do the change, like we can absolutely help. But it's also just important to understand at the beginning, well, this is going to feel uncomfortable. So you can tell your toddler, I know that you awake in the night, and that's okay to be awake. See if you can lay there and maybe just think of the things that we could do the next day together. Or we're going to make some changes to bedtime tonight, and anytime you do something different it feels a bit like I'm not sure about this. You're really talking in their language, like when you first started kindy, or you first changed and went to Auntie Joe's house, for example, or whatever it is that they're now comfortable with. You'll be like, at the start, like when mum started my new job, or when I first had you as a baby, I was like, how am I going to go with this feels so, and then I was like, oh right, I've got this, like I'm getting better at this. And so, really explaining to them that it's going to feel uncomfortable and that is okay and that is normal is actually a really great thing to do for our toddlers, because it's basically setting them up to go, oh, I knew I was going to feel like this, but my mum and dad said that it was okay. I can feel like this and it's still going to be okay. In fact, it's normal and I'm expected to feel like this before we make any changes. And that's really, really important when it comes to toddler bedtimes as well. Doesn't matter if really, I'd be doing this sort of talk and language like from about 2 onwards. But if your little one, you think understands a bit more earlier, then that's no worries as well. So I am going to get now the other thing is, guys, is your confidence. So knowing that both parents are on the same page if there's two around, knowing that you've got a really solid plan is a really big, it feels really big for toddlers, and then they tend to trust it a bit more, and the transition tends to be a little easier than what parents. It's so crazy because sometimes it's just like a parent will be like, I've been doing this or that, but they've just had that bit of like, I think I'm doing the right, like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. Whereas imagine if somebody was like, I'm going to pull you out of your comfort zone, out of what's familiar, and we may try this. I'm not really sure how we're going to go. Like, you'll be like, no, thanks. I'm going to do everything in my power to stay with what I know because this is just too not for me. Like, this just seems uncertain. But if somebody comes in and same with babies, the baby's first language is energy. You're like, right, Baba, we've been doing something. It's not working for us now. Now we're going to move something else. There's just a different energy around that. And so that's really, really important. And once you understand how to, do this and the important factors, it makes such a big difference. So I hope that that helps. So I'm going to give you guys, just some time to see if there's any questions about what we've spoken about tonight, like feedback, anything, please let me know. Yeah. The other thing that I was going to say is with night waking, especially with toddlers, it's also really worth trialing a few different awake times. So if your little one's still napping and they're a toddler, they, you try up to 7:30, for example. Like make sure you trial a few different awake times. It might not just be about that, what is happening in the lead up, but make sure you do trial, a few different awake times just to see if it helps. And when they're toddlers, you could trial a good 15, 20 minutes either which way. When they're little, you might only trial 5 to 10 minutes either which way and see. Just gonna wait another moment. Oh, perfect. Oh, good, Tammy. That's so good. Okay, Manda got you. So here's the thing, your lead ups matter the most. So the issue is that you're probably for example, like in that lead up, really check there's no zoning on the feed. Check the feed's not falling close to sleep. Check she's built up that sleep pressure and that energy expenditure, the right awake time. Like I can't stress it enough. Don't just focus on the method. That's like my 5%. I'll teach you methods, that's fine, but it's your lead up. Focus on that, the right awake time for your little one, and then honestly, hun, from there, I get that you don't have to leave her, but she does have to get through that initial process. But your biggest role is making sure that she's got all that sleep pressure, not overtiredness, but the sleep pressure ready to go down. So we've connected, we've had that outdoor, that like we've had that playtime. She's built up that sleep pressure. We've got the right awake time. We know how we're going to make this change. We're going to put her down, and then you don't have to leave her, but you do have to allow her to get through those big feelings because she wants what she knows now. She wants what she's become reaccustomed to, all those things. And you're not going to get away with it without crying. Typically, I mean, sometimes it's, yes, we go into homes and they just go off to sleep and parents are like, what the frick? But usually there's some big feelings around that change. And your job is not to join in the chaos of those feelings. It is to be like, I'm here, babe. Shh, 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 mommy's here. Not trying to like frantically fix, holding them down, pulling, like laying them back down, picking them up, panicking. It is just, I expect this. I know that they're going to have a hard time initially. I'm going to be here for my babe, but I'm going to move away eventually, over a period of time, and or if the leave and check, like whichever one you sort of feel more comfortable with. But I'm going to try not to make it worse by all the picking up, putting down, all the stepping over the cot, and all of that, right? I'm here. I'm going to support you. I love you. We're going to get through this and we're okay. So Rob, got you. What's he, is he napping still, Ezra? Just tell me about that and what time bedtime is. Okay. So I would just say, and what time's bedtime? Okay. So what I would do is that if your little one's napping at 3.5, it should be longer than 30 minutes. Like, and most days not, is good. So I really would be mindful to expect that, he's not going to take an hour or more if he's napping. I'm pretty aware that he probably still takes a while when he hasn't napped. So that physical side of things, really important. Getting out that physical energy is so important. The next thing is that if he has napped, I'd keep it at 30 minutes and then put him down closer to 7:30 at least around that time. If he hasn't napped around that 6:30 mark, is great. The next thing usually is that the reason why that bedtime is taking so long is there's too much dialogue between parents and child. So the connection part, really important, check that. So it's not that he's just trying to get that at bedtime, plus it's just really important in general. Then what I would be doing is one morning stepping out. It's usually that there's too much of a dialogue, there's too much like tug of war, communication going on at that point. There's not a clear instruction, things aren't being shut down. It's that management of what's happening during that bedtime that will make all the difference. So, and then moving away and getting to the point where you're stepping away. And then, yeah, just being mindful of nap days. Like, is this really actually blowing things out too much, and adjusting that if you need to. Amanda, how old is your little one? Oh, hold on, have you put up here? 15-month-old. Okay, so one nap. So usually, let me work this out. I'd be napping her about 11:30. Yeah, just before around 11:30. Hopefully we're getting a good hour and a half up to 2 hours. And then another 5 hours before bed. So about 6:30. And if your little one sleeps longer for whatever reason and bedtime's going to fall closer to 7, you might do like 4.5 to 4 hours 45 around that. But around that 5-ish hour mark would be okay. Perfect. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate your time to come on, and obviously, I hope that you've taken some things out of it that you can really take away with your little ones. I'm just going to check that. Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, big love, guys. Take care. You know where I am. If you've got any questions after tonight, please email me at info@gentlesleep.com.au. Follow me on Instagram for Gentle Sleep Specialist, and feel free to DM me if you have any questions as well. So, big love, guys. Take care.